So, there's been a lot of discussions lately surrounding the Nintendo Switch Virtual Console. For one, it feels weird, that we're over a year now into the system's life and there's still pretty much no word on its launch. But also, there was this Sega Ages announcement over the past weekend. Sega is going to start pushing games onto the Switch under this label, which will initially have, I believe they said, 15 games. This was announced at that FES show where they also announced the Sega Mega Drive Mini. But then when they were asked about the potential for more classic Sega games to wind up on the Switch, the senior producer over at Sega Games said the door is pretty much wide open, claiming that if this first batch sells well, we may even see Sega Saturn and Dreamcast games release on the Switch again under this Sega Ages label. So why are people pointing to this as worrying in terms of a virtual console? Well, if Sega is going to bring over a bunch of classic games, why wouldn't they put them on the virtual console? I really don't see any significance, personally, in the Sega Ages thing. We've had things like this in the past, with the Mega Man collections, all the Neo Geo games that are just straight up on the eShop, and nobody was like, oh, this must mean the virtual console is dead. Another thing I've seen people point to is, of course, the minis, the NES Mini and the SNES Mini. Those sell really well. Perhaps those are a sort of replacement for the virtual console. Well, yes, they sell insanely well, and yes, I agree, I think they will do, an N64 classic, perhaps a GameCube classic. That does not make them all a suitable replacement for a virtual console. This is the age of streaming and smart devices and all that, okay? While I think there's room for both the classic consoles as well as a virtual console, you're never going to convince me that Nintendo sees the future of playing these games being a bunch of these little boxes hooked up to your TV with cables connecting the controllers, for Christ's sake. Sorry, I'm not buying that at all either. I've seen people say they feel like this delay has been to open the door to indies. Nintendo has gone hard with indie games this gen, with the whole Nindies showcases and that. And if they had all the classic games on there, it would possibly detract from those indie games. People may buy the classic games instead of the new indies. I guess that makes more sense than freaking out about the Sega Ages thing. But I don't know. I think in this day and age, the cream rises to the top, even in terms of indie games. Tons of people are looking to give unknown games exposure, especially on YouTube. I mean, how many people are out there doing hidden gems or top 10 games you haven't played type lists? Rocket League is currently dominating the eShop, has been pretty much since it released, really. So the new AAA Switch games aren't detracting from that indie game. Shovel Knight did some of its best numbers on the Wii U, despite that system having a low install base, and obviously that one did have a virtual console. I don't think great indie games have as much trouble finding their audience as they once did. Once again, YouTubers are trying to put spotlights on them, and Nintendo themselves are putting spotlights on them. And I think the virtual console could even help indies, in a way. Keeping with Nintendo's push to apparently wanting to be the most indie-friendly platform, and the fact that many of these indie darlings are usually inspired by classic games, I'd build in a recommendation function into the virtual console that highlights these games. Like, oh, you're gonna get Super Metroid, for instance. Well, might we also recommend this indie title Axiom Verge, as Axiom Verge plays very similar to the Metroid games, stuff like that. And if we're being real talking about this whole idea of, oh, the virtual console, it's gonna hurt the sales of indie games, and, some people might not like what I have to say about it, might say I'm a little mean, oh, you hate indies. No, I love indie games. But this is a business. I think it's great that Nintendo, gives them all this spotlight, highlights them in the Nindy showcase and on the eShop, everything like that. But if people want to play those classic games, if people want to play those classic games perhaps over those indie games, you should let them. You let the market decide. And like I said, you keep doing what you're doing to highlight them. Like I said, I'd recommend, with the virtual console, recommending indie games that are, similar to some of those virtual console games. Still give them the ability to thrive, but you can't be, designing your whole system culture around what can you do to make, the indie game successful. I mean, where does this end? I mean, let's take Pokemon, right? The week that new Pokemon game comes out, hell, the month that new Pokemon game comes out, any indie game that launches that same month is probably going to be in trouble because everyone's going to be playing Pokemon. Well, that's not good. We need to help out those indie games. Maybe we should cancel Pokemon. Cancel it, and then all the indie games can thrive. As soon as you broaden this concept just a little bit, it doesn't make sense. Essentially, I think Nintendo Switch can be the best place for these indie games to thrive. They can make an environment where they can thrive without having to be the place where we coddle them, where we're going to make all these major decisions around whether or not it helps out the indie game scene. Okay, there has to be a limit somewhere. So no, I think there is way too much money for Nintendo to make off their classic catalog, to not have a virtual console, or to delay it for any reason besides the program itself, especially on the Nintendo Switch. The fact that it offers both portable and docked play on your TV in one package, I mean, come on, this is the dream machine for a virtual console. People are going to go crazy snatching up classic games on this thing once they're able to do so. So what do I think is going on? I spent all this time already talking about how I don't really buy these other ideas, so what's the deal? Personally, I think it's pretty simple. Look no further than the paid online service that we know Nintendo has coming. That has been delayed long past its original planned launch date. And why is that? I think they realize that Nintendo, don't have the best track record with online. They've never offered any type of paid online service like this before, and they need to make it good. They need to make it good at launch. I mean, remember the classic games deal as it was originally planned to be part of that service? You know, at first they wanted to give us one classic game per month, then they were going to take it away and give you a new one the next month. People reacted negatively, and then Nintendo came around and said, okay, you're going to keep them all now. They're worried, I think, about screwing this up, and they should be. You know, Smash Brothers is coming out this year, and I think it will be no coincidence that Smash will probably release at least around the time that service finally drops. You know, they might want to give it to you beforehand to hook players and then get them to pay, or, you know, they might want to do it later as a big incentive. I don't know. But I do know they're going to want that to be a major selling point for it. In terms of online features, probably the biggest I've seen being demanded as of late is the request for cloud saves, you know, backups for your save files. Maybe they're considering or working on including that. Lots of stuff at play here that they may either still be working on or even debating whether or not they should still include it at launch. Obviously, you want it to be as attractive as possible on day one. Now, I'm not saying the fact that this is going on is an excuse for these things to take long. Let's be clear on that. I'm not trying to use this as an excuse. I'm trying to explain what I think is going on. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with the fact that this is taking all this time. And so I think with the Virtual Console, it's kind of a similar situation. People are more excited for it, that's for sure. I don't think many people are actually pumped about paying to play games online, but there are definitely concerns with the Virtual Console and questions that Nintendo probably wants to get down well beforehand. Obviously, the biggest one, which games will be there at launch and from which systems. This is probably one you may have forgotten with past iterations of the Virtual Console. I sure as hell didn't. The drawn-out process that it was to get some of these fan favorites on the VC, even from Nintendo themselves. For instance, do you remember that Star Fox 64? Classic, right? Everyone loves that game. But do you remember that it didn't arrive on the Wii U Virtual Console until last January? Yes, as in less than 2 months before the release of the Switch. I think they have to know they need to do better than that this go around. Beyond that, how much are these games going to cost? How, if at all, will we be able to transfer purchases from past systems to this new one? That's one I see all the time. Will I be able to transfer my purchases from the Wii U, from the 3DS, from both? Will that cost me some sort of fee to do that? Will we see an entirely different form of distribution? This has been heavily rumored. It doesn't necessarily have to be just another Virtual Console, and I do really like this possibility. In the vein of the Xbox Game Pass program, just have people pay a monthly fee for access to all of the Virtual Console games, with new ones being added regularly. Now that would be a great way to get people over the worrying about being able to transfer their current digital libraries. Yeah, people would be upset about it probably a bit at first, but if Nintendo rolled out a solid swath of games from past consoles including that coveted GameCube library. I don't think you can find me any discussion about a Switch Virtual Console online where somebody doesn't bring up the GameCube. If they had the games, they're there right off the bat, and just charged a few bucks a month for full access, perhaps had it as a premium level to bundle in with the online service, I think people would be all over it. But with something like that, it's not like something you could do later. If they want to do that Nintendo Netflix type deal, you couldn't, well, you could, but it wouldn't be smart, I'll say, to have people buying these games a la carte at the start, then roll out a program that's like a Netflix deal. People would be, and rightfully, pissed off if you did that. And going that route would be sort of system-proof, right? One of the big benefits of a whole, games as a service program is you don't really have to worry about transferring purchases or what do you do when a new system comes out. They just bring the whole program over to the next system. I honestly think hashing all this stuff out, making these sorts of decisions, took Nintendo longer than they expected, and that's why I think we're in this situation right now. So yeah, with that, this video's a wrap. There is just way too much money, in my opinion, to be made with Nintendo's classic games, especially on a system like the Nintendo Switch, again offering that portable and on-TV play, for them to just totally pass up on it. Maybe it won't be necessarily a Switch Virtual Console, maybe it'll be called something different, maybe it'll be totally overhauled, like I said, maybe the distribution will be totally different, but I definitely think they're still doing something with it. I think along with the paid online, Nintendo is trying to figure out how to maximize the package, make it as good as they can, both for themselves, how do they make the most profit, but also how do they make it good for us, make us want to spend money right out of the gate. Especially since they don't necessarily have the best track record with these sorts of things. So let me know your thoughts on what's going on with the Virtual Console in the comments. As always, I'm John Zakari, and thanks for watching.